Orlando Fleming stands among the foremost bassists in contemporary jazz, renowned for his virtuosic technique, boundless creativity, and commanding rhythmic presence. A former professional cricketer turned jazz luminary, Orlando's journey from the UK to New York City propelled him into collaborations with legends like Jimmy Cobb and Branford Marsalis. As both the sideman and bandleader, he has earned acclaim for projects like Owl Trio and Romantic Funk, blending inventive compositions with a signature fusion of polyrhythm and lyrical exploration. So, Orlando, good to see you. Thanks for being with me today.
Wow, thanks for that introduction. Thanks, Abe. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Beautiful. So, Orlando, the first things I like when I get to, talk to somebody who, when I have their music on my phone and and I see their name come up on the records, it's a little bit more special. One of my favorite records, Way Out Willie, Seamus Blake's
Oh, yeah.
record, I think
Okay.
from
Yeah.
2007, and having
Yeah.
seen you as a guitar player, having seen you, at
Right.
the Village Vanguard with Kurt Rosenwinkel, it's a pleasure to
Oh,
talk to you.
oh, wow. You were there. Great. Yeah. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah. Those were great times. Yeah.
So, one thing I was kind of curious about is that you're very generous. You produce a lot of content and you really show things on the bass that bassists want to know. So when did you start to think about producing that content to share with everybody? Because for bass players, it's some invaluable stuff on social media.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed teaching, and I like sharing what I know. And so I've always done, on tour, if we're on the road, we do master classes as bands, and I've done those sorts of things and learned a lot actually from people like Ari Honig and Kurt Rosenwinkel, people I've been on the road with. And actually during COVID, uh, my wife said, how are you going to make some money? So I started doing these online group bass lessons and just selling them very cheaply. They were like $10 or something, and then people showed up and I started enjoying them. And then that turned into like this sort of subscription thing, which I have now called In the Shed with Orlando Fleming, which is like my Patreon. It's actually just moving to Patreon in 2025 in a month or so. But yeah, so that's how it started, yeah, I just like teaching, I just like,
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And
yeah,
there's some great stuff on there. And $10 is a very reasonable price for someone to afford, especially jazz musicians. We're all trying to make a living.
yeah,
But as far as you said you like teaching. What's something
yeah.
unconventional, a piece of advice you might share with them if they want to go into this business playing the bass?
Oof, this is it's a big question. Well, my thing generally has been fundamentals about getting on the double bass especially, is such a difficult instrument to get a sound on. And so I kind of drill my students about the fundamentals, like one note equals 20 on the guitar, just one note. You've got to get that one note just singing. And otherwise, if you don't get that strong sound, the bass just gets lost in the mix with the drums and so that's what I sort of drill home to my students, is basically fundamentals and just spend some time learning, getting a great sound on the instrument. Also, from my background in the UK, I came at jazz from more of a classical point of view. So I was never kind of really involved with the rhythmic side of the music. So it was always a mystery to me, actually, growing up in the UK, how these great American bass players had such great time and groove. And I actually remember I wrote to Reginald Veal via a mutual friend, Julian Joseph, this great UK piano player. And Reginald Veal wrote me some answers back, and they were great, but they still didn't kind of demystify this groove thing. I said, how do you play in time and all that stuff? And I eventually realized it was just, if you grew up in a different culture, you get that rhythmic kind of embodied in you, that rhythmic kind of pulse. And I had to do extra work. So on the rhythmic side of things, and getting a pocket and getting a groove, and I had to sort of readdress the
Yeah,
balance.
yeah. And
Yeah,
as you're talking about this, I always like to think about these little things that when I see someone play live, they're just little things that I notice about their approach. And you can tell me if I'm wrong about this or if it's
yeah,
something you think about. some bass players technique may feel like the strong beats on 2 and 4, but yours was just every beat really just seemed to be like that's the strong beat. Every 1, 2, 3, 4. There's not one that's stronger
Yeah.
than the other necessarily. Is that something you think
Yeah,
about?
yeah. Well, thanks for noticing that. I mean, yeah, generally, I mean, the thing that you've got to get, especially when you're playing walking bass, is you've just got to get a consistent sound, which is just literally like that. And like the drummer on the ride cymbal really has to get that together and be able to do that. And that's really hard thing to do. It's easier to sort of float in and out the time, but just to do that, so it's really hard. So I've spent a lot of time just working on that sound and making every note exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to see. And then you start embellishing it, but if you start from embellishing it, then you kind of get lost in the, the flow. So yeah, that's the thing I drill home to my
Yeah, and
students.
it was, it's very, we want to always find our voice on the instrument, and
Mm.
there's such a history. We know all these great bass players. Anything you could tell us about maybe finding your voice with a genre that has so much history?
Yeah, it's a great question, such a big question. I mean, before I moved to New York, I just wanted to sound like Ray Brown, basically, or Christian McBride. I went through phases like we all do, And I think that was good. I think everything's a journey. It's a big journey, and I spent a lot of time just focusing on those players. And then when I got older and I moved to New York, suddenly I was almost sort of competing with people like Christian McBride because people could call him for a gig. He was playing more local gigs back then, People would call him. And so I was thinking,
I
well,
just
why
saw
do
him
I...
3 days ago,
Oh, really? Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that's amazing. I mean, he's like one of those guys. I'm just like, wow, how does he do that on the bass? So I was thinking, well, why do I want to sound like him or them or whatever? And when people can call them, and that's what New York does to you a bit. It kind of forces you to say, well, hold on, just trust what you have yourself and just develop that. But so it happened, luckily, naturally for me to sort of to delve into my own voice. But it's hard as a bass player because you're always a sideman playing with other people, and you think that you're supposed to do a certain
Yeah, you
job.
you, you mentioned an
Yeah,
interesting point. I'm so I just want to. I'm
yeah,
sorry to
yeah, yeah.
interject, but
No, please do.
no, but it's such an interesting point because one time I was playing a gig. I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I remember like I was distinctly trying to sound like a certain guitar. This is like maybe 10 years ago, and like I actually
Yeah,
told him, I'm like, you're a phone. I could hear my voice say, "This is like fraudulent," like,
yeah.
and when we're trying to emulate somebody like that. And but you're talking. Did you ever have anything like that? Like something saying, "I need to stop doing this," like, or trying to.
Yeah, yeah.
Was
Well, for me, it happened a lot with blues licks, and you sort of, I've got to learn these blues licks because that's what Ray Brown played. I felt sort of disingenuous doing it, and I think it's more to do with licks too, and how much you're really improvising and how much you're just regurgitating. So that I stopped myself from playing those licks that kind of sound like I just contrived a sentence, And if I'm playing blues licks now, I try and I try and improvise around the notes rather than just play a lick that falls under the fingers. So
Sure, sure.
that's the sort of thing, really. I think when you really in that improvisational space, you get rid of all that a lot of that imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I apologize for this, but as I have to ask you about working with Kurt
Oh yeah,
Rosenwinkel.
of course. Yeah, yeah,
Just as someone who made, I heard his music when I was like a teenager, and I was like, whoa. So
yeah.
can you talk about a little bit that, like getting the phone call to go on tour and the
Yeah.
experience at all?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that was a great time. I worked with Kurt for probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. I was playing it and touring with him. And it came off the back of me playing with Lage Lund because he liked the guitarist Lage Lund, and so he heard me through Lage's music. And I can't remember the first few gigs, but the thing I remember about Kurt is that his tunes are just so beautiful, the melodies are just so strong. The music, he's got melodies, and a lot of those tunes actually, they were more simple than I actually thought they were. They were just these beautiful pieces. So that's one of the main things that, makes him stand out from the rest is his compositions are just beautiful and his sense of melody. Another
Absolutely.
thing was his, I mean, he would spend a lot of, he's got a, obviously he's got amazing lines and he would spend, no, another thing that sort of struck me that was slightly different than other guitarists was that he plays a lot of, more rhythm guitar in terms of like Brazilian grooves and stuff like that. And he can really lay something down like that, which I didn't get so much from maybe some of the younger Kurt clones or whatever,
I
and
like
I
how you
felt
say the
like
word,
that.
you say clones.
So yeah, well, I mean, it's totally understandable,
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's I
Yeah.
get it.
So that sort of grounded his pocket in the sense I felt like he could just, sit in the pocket a lot more, and that was amazing. As far as I know, yeah, playing at the Vanguard was probably I think a couple of times I played at the Vanguard with him. That was, obviously great.
I think when I saw you with him, it was
Yeah,
with Aaron Parks and Alan Mednard. I might be wrong, but
yeah,
I think that was
yeah.
it.
I mean, the gigs with Aaron Parks on piano were amazing. I mean, those two together were just perfect. And I just actually there's some videos on YouTube. I think there's a concert. The sound is pretty bad, but there's a couple of concerts up there, and Aaron and Kurt just sound amazing together. I think we do Polish song. Check it out because I don't think he's recorded that since the first version on his early album, which was just him singing it, I think.
Yeah, no,
But he
that's
just plays it. And
it's
Aaron just takes the amazing solo, and I'm just playing roots. It's fine. I'm just like, oh, well, I don't need to do anything else. It's just like
every
sounds
every
amazing.
every jazz musician, at least the people, a lot of people that I speak to, and they say it's a dream to play at the Village Vanguard.
Oh, yeah,
When
exactly.
was that the first time you had played the Vanguard, or was it you had played there
No,
prior?
I played there before with David Sanchez,
Okay.
and with the quartet with Lage Lund and Henry Cole, and that was my first week. I played there. I have played there with Jeff Tain Watts before too, so that was that probably that time was my sort of that was like wow playing with the Vanguard with Jeff Tain Watts. I think it was Dave Kokoski and Marcus Strickland,
I
and
remember
that
seeing
was
that on the
amazing.
website. for some reason I couldn't make it, but I would have definitely wanted to go, so.
Well, that was amazing. Playing with Jeff Tain Watts is so amazing. The specific thing I remember about those gigs was that he just wants to play. So each set was pushing nearly 2 hours long, and every tune there's a lot of kind of intense tunes with bass lines. So I was sort of eating slices of pizza and nuts in the break just to get stamina going. But it was super fun playing with Tain. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, to step on such a legendary stage where, all these records have been recorded
yeah,
and, you feel the room has a smell to it and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Do you tell yourself anything before you go on stage? Like, or maybe have like a mantra, or do you need to practice a certain amount? Like, what's going to make you feel the most comfortable before hitting the bandstand?
Oh, this is I think I'm generally quite relaxed. Sometimes I'm a bit uptight and English, So I might have a glass of wine or something, not too much alcohol, but just something just to loosen me up a bit, or that's kind of helps me. I'm usually on the road when you get to see the pattern because you see your sort of highs and lows. I usually make sure I like to do some exercise in the day, not like vigorous, but go for a run and just make sure I'm, healthy in that respect too,
Yeah, and that one glass of one is okay, one's
Well, one is okay. Sometimes I've, gone beyond that, to be totally honest, and I've definitely gone past it and say, well, no, no, I'm not going to do that. But obviously, it depends on the gig too, and how well I know the music, and yeah,
And I know you're back in the UK now.
yeah.
So how does it feel transitioning back to the place where spent your earlier years coming from do you feel like now you go back and you have this experience that you bring to your home? Like, does it feel like almost coming full circle in a way?
Yeah, I think definitely. Yeah, it's quite strange coming back to a scene that I kind of knew and was a part of, and I've learnt so much from playing with people like Kurt and being in the States. So yeah, I am trying to impart that knowledge in my teaching here. I teach at the Royal Academy of Music, just part-time, and occasionally to some of the other schools. And
Yeah, I knew a
yeah,
couple of jazz musicians from the UK. I'm wondering if you know them, but I
yeah,
mean, yeah, is AJ Brinkman? Do you know him by any chance?
I don't know.
And this piano player Alan Benzie, these are like they're some people
The,
I knew in my 20s, but
well, the names might be familiar. I'm really out of touch because I'm out in the countryside here, which is quite nice. So I
okay.
moved from the city. And I'm near an airport, which is good. And I
But you're teaching at the
occasionally got to
Royal
London.
Academy though.
Yeah, I don't teach that there that much, maybe a couple of times a month, But yeah, that's a great course actually. It's very small and they have some good students there. So yeah,
So
yeah, sorry.
oh
Go
no
on.
no. So you make the change back home. I mean, going back to your, do you know get excited when you would get the opportunity to come back to play in the States? Is it like you get like, fired up or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I've been, the first time I was really back to play was last June, and I was actually playing electric with Sean Whalen, doing an album with him. This
I'm
great,
interviewing him in a couple weeks
oh,
actually.
great, yeah, sure. So, yeah, that was great. We played an album, I recorded an album, and then I did a gig at Smalls with Miki Yamanaka, which was fun. It was just to show up and play some tunes, and
Yeah, that's
that
awesome.
was a good thing. She called something about 300 miles an hour, so that was good for my, get New York experience.
Yeah, you said 300 miles an hour. When you're playing the bass at those fast tempos, like, because is it when someone calls off the tune that fast, is it like, is it like I just need to like keep up, like I'm like literally like just holding on, or is it like can you find the fun in that too, or is it just more of a workout challenge, like playing at those fast tempos?
Yeah, you're right. It's a different thing altogether. It's basically whether I've got the chops together
I
or
think
not. I mean,
so.
yeah. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I can go in and out of having the chops, but luckily, I think I had been practicing fast. I do that as part of my. Usually, I do that as part of my warm up. Is play Cherokee in 12 keys really fast. Walking bass, just walking bass. Like all the keys, starting at around 320 BPM, then going up to about 440, 450 BPM.
Oh my goodness.
And so that sort of thing just keeps me prepared for it. But there's not, I mean, when I start improvising properly, it's when I start playing notes in groups of threes or playing around with the rhythm. That's the sort of improvisational part. But otherwise, yeah, a lot of the time it's just don't stop.
Yeah, Orlando, I'm actually kind of curious too, because from the outside looking in, me being someone who's heard you on records and seen you play at the best jazz club in the world, the Village Vanguard, I'd like to ask you, there's a lot of mystery about this life as a professional musician, professional jazz musician.
Yeah.
From the outside, people who aren't musicians, but also from younger jazz musicians, maybe who are in school wanting to get into this business. Is there a
Yeah.
misconception you feel kind of strongly about this life that you wish more people understood? Something, something that you might think about, like, oh, I wish, people don't know, but if they knew this or something like that.
Well, this is a big question. It's tough. I mean, people generally know it's tough, to be a working musician, and I make it work with lots of other things. So the teaching, you know, the touring, there's a sideman, and doing my own projects. They all kind of add up to, a living. So that is tough. I think you've got to always. I mean, sometimes when you do kind of think about you're not making enough money or like getting a proper job or whatever, you got to appreciate how important art is in this world because it's needed. And unfortunately, the public don't know that. But you have to be there just in case they do. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? A bit vague.
Absolutely. It's if the average person went and heard live music or
Yeah.
just went to a museum and basically these things that help us become more introspective when we observe or listen to them and get in
Yeah,
touch with
yeah,
who we are.
exactly. Art, especially takes us away from language because everything else in science too is all about language and descriptions. But with music, it gives you that feeling that just takes you out of yourself. And the world really needs people like us. And so it's always important to remember that what you're doing is very important, even though it might not show financially, you know.
No, I mean it's money is one thing, but then
Hmm.
there's the pursuit of the art and your own
Yeah,
happiness, but it's
yeah,
almost separation in some ways.
yeah,
So have you
yeah. They're
had
different things. Yeah,
Yeah, no, let me ask you this. You talked about Ray Brown and Christian McBride, these people who influenced you, and obviously you're being influenced by the artist you're playing with in the moment.
yeah.
What do you feel the most influenced by? Any like non-musical experiences you've had that have influenced your approach to playing?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, more recently, I've been reading a lot of more philosophical books and
I love
stuff.
philosophy. That's great.
Oh, yeah. Well, an amateur at it, but there's this one person called Ian McGilchrist who's sort of a neuroscientist philosopher, and he's just enlightened a few things about consciousness in the world. He's kind of like a scientific bridge to the spiritual world,
Like Sam
basically.
Harris type, Sam
Yeah,
Harris?
yeah, well, he kind of, but he's more pro spirituality and religion in a certain sense, not the the fundamental religions, but he's very interesting, and he has a bibliography at the end of his book which is 200 pages long. I mean, he uses examples from like Native American wisdom to like philosophers and Western, all over the place, Eastern philosophy and everything. Anyway, so he's kind of made me appreciate art. What I was saying before, appreciate the music and appreciate stuff that it's not doesn't fall under categories, so
Yeah.
much.
And
So
and like you were saying, art is so important. I mean, you become a professional artist, professional musician. Was it a concert you went to where a light switch went off and you said, "I'm gonna," because I'm gonna go for it. This is the what kind of like what was the catalyst to inform wanting to be the professional bassist?
yeah, that's another big question. I mean, I started out on electric bass, and I was really into level 42 when I was younger, which is, Mark King played slap bass, and it was a fun band because my big brother liked them. And so I took up the electric bass, and I just used to lock myself in the basement and learn all the bass lines and went that way. So it was fun. But then I had the discipline from the classical side to sort of do scales as well and do the hard stuff. So when I got into the Royal Academy, because I gave up cricket, I played a season in the second team with this team Somerset, which is a professional club. They offered me a new contract, but I'd gotten into the Royal Academy of Music. So I turned down the contract, and then this was when I was about 18, I went to study, and that's when I knew I really wanted to do it. I put cricket aside and I just did that. And then various experiences along the way, like with Branford. I played with Branford Marsalis when I was very young, at 23, just by chance, because I played on an album with Jeff Tain Watts with a British piano player, and they needed a bass player desperately in Europe. So I played with Branford, and I messed up the gig. It was a tough experience, but he gave me enough confidence, to say you've got what it takes, and little words like that from him, really kind of drove me. And then that was my drive to move to New York, Branford. And
Wow.
so that,
So when you
yeah.
would maybe you had, would you say you maybe a little bit of doubt, but you always went back to what he had told you?
Yeah, I think it's maybe subconsciously those things were driving me. Yeah. I mean, it's a really big question. My dad asked me sometimes, what drives you? And you're like, well, other than just, surviving and, what motivates you? But a few people had said some nice things, and that just kind of kept me afloat.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. And you've done so many things that I admire. And I was also kind of curious, in your journey thus far, what would you say you're most grateful for in your career?
Wow, that's well,
This
I'm
is why I call it
grateful.
the rabbit hole sessions.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I'd. Yeah, I mean, I'd. If you'd sent the questions in advance, I could have come up with some interesting answers. But I'm grateful that I can play in front of people, and I make some people's lives better from my playing. I mean, that is great. I'm really happy that I can do that and give that to people.
I mean,
I'm
I'm
not.
telling you firsthand, like
Yeah, yeah,
that record, the Way Out Willie record, like, do you
yeah,
know how many times I've been in the car listening to that first
yeah,
track, like just,
yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
oh,
just in
thank
the
you.
zone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to be able to do that and actually scrape a living, do it, and have a supportive wife as well who lets me, pursue my dreams and
Oh
stuff.
yeah, I mean, and family is so important. I mean, I know a lot of
Mm.
jazz musicians end up divorced, and it's to be in a supportive
Yeah.
relationship certainly is sounds like it's been vital.
Yeah, I think a lot of, partners don't know what they're signing up for when they when they meet a musician, and but yeah, I'm very grateful for that and just grateful for the few fans I have.
No, no, there's more than a few. I'll definitely tell you. I'm always kind of curious to ask this question to people that I really respect and admire what they do, which is if you were the musician you are today after all of these experiences, even I know you've played with we talked about Branford and stuff, but if you could go back to the 1960s and put your own band together for one night in New
Oof.
York or something, any names come to mind of people you'd like to hire, like drummers or
Yeah,
piano, that sort of thing?
I could think. I mean, Alvin Jones. I mean, and I know they lived a lot longer. Wayne Shorter. Uh, uh, I think I think Herbie Hancock, Bill Evans, or Herbie Hancock on piano. Those guys spring to mind immediately, and then it'd be great to play with Miles. Miles. So no surprise people there, but those. I think the 50s and 60s were just such great decades, and I try and teach that to my students. And there are new musicians and there are new scenes and everything, but that period was so special and a kind of a culmination of so many factors of people's lives, good and bad, just coming together, and then you find these Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter growing out of it, and it's one of those decades that needs to be taught in schools and everything and forever,
Yeah,
especially the
it's almost,
50s and
it's
60s.
like
Yeah,
it's almost a new time because now with
yeah.
technology and 15-second clips on TikTok is
Well, that's
almost the exact
yeah,
opposite of watching John Coltrane play for 25 minutes in a
yeah.
club. And like
Well,
it's hopefully
yeah.
things like these things tend to repeat themselves. So hopefully we're going back to that in a sense in some ways.
I'm aware of contributing to the content that these short snippets of content too. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline for people to sit down and listen to an album or spend a long time on one thing, and that is a problem. Sometimes I have too. So yeah, that's a tough thing. I think vinyl is a good thing. I sit down and listen to a record with my wife sometimes, listen to the whole record, and that process helps me get out of those swiping zones.
Are there certain recordings that you find yourself going back to listen to that it's always like, I know the feeling I'm going to get from this record, like, that they're just those recordings that are special to you?
Yeah, off the top of my head, Crescent, John Coltrane. Uh, there's a Bill Evans album, Moon Dreams, I really love. And Miles Ahead, I really love. I mean, there's so many. Then there's Weather Report. There's 70s albums from the fusion. Some ones that I grew up when I was 15. I listened to some fusion albums like Weather Report and Jacob Astorius. So those things are nostalgic too, which just,
Did you
you
like
know.
Mahavishnu also? Like,
I actually, Mahavishnu, somehow I skipped, but it was basically sort of, yeah, Weather Report. Again, Wayne Shorter was a big influence, his compositions. So, and obviously Jacko, but
we'll have to do
yeah,
another whole podcast on
yeah,
Jocko and
yeah, yeah. I mean, absolute genius. One thing about him before I know you've got to finish. One
no,
thing
no,
about
no.
him was so
Please
amazing.
go for it.
Yeah, um, someone like him who had the drive to get all those chops together. Takes a certain personality to get the chops, but then to be able to use them and play melodically, and play those beautiful fretless melodies, and then also have the pocket stuff as well. He had everything. Do you know what I mean? So that's a rare combination of those three
Would you
things. The
say he was a
drive,
genius? He was a genius, you think?
yeah, Definitely. Yeah, I think it helped having his mentors. I think it helped having Joe Zaunel make him play, melodically. Although I know that Zaunel they have a tough relationship.
Yeah.
They were similar personalities, I think, so they clashed. But I think Zaunel got him. There's that bit in the Jacko documentary where Zaunel says, is it Zaunel? Yeah, Zaunel says he stopped Jacko playing this bass intro. He says, "Look, we know you can play. Just give me melodies." And then Jacko plays this beautiful melody. That's all it takes sometimes from a mentor, is just those little sentences and those things that just change your whole perspective.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, this has been great. It's such a pleasure to sit down and talk to you. Where can everybody find you on, social media? Anything you want to mention for those things?
Yeah, well, I have I give bass lessons online, private, and then sort of I have this Patreon channel. So it's just type in Orlando Fleming at Patreon, and that is something that I'm really into doing. So if you're a bass player, check that out. And there's different tiers, and it's the Patreon thing. So yeah, I have various books. Actually, I have one here that's a bit of the Get It Together is my bass book. It's all the stuff, for jazz bass players, all the stuff that I wish, my teachers at college had told me
I like
about.
the title.
Get it together. Yeah, come on, get it together. Yeah. So that is a book you can find on Amazon, and there's ebooks too, on my website. And just please listen to my music. I have a band called Romantic Funk, and I have 3 albums out with them, and then I have the Al Trio. I have a couple of albums out with them, and I have so yeah, that's basically it, I think.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.